The next guest at Wall of Sound needs no introduction, but for the ill-informed, he is an exceptional musician who has lived a life that we are all about to read about with his brand new memoir, The Royal We, released on November 4th. And Roddy Bottum joins us once again. Welcome back to Wall of Sound.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everybody. How's it going?
We are exceptional, but we're exceptionally excited to read about your life. I mean, this is
Cool.
uh, such a big, momentous occasion for yourself to be able to finally share these intricate details of your life in this memoir. What was the catalyst that led you to this point to show the world?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a momentous occasion for me. I haven't really honestly spoken about it with anybody. So this conversation right here kind of feels like a heavy thing. I'm realizing that as I'm answering you, like, oh my God, I haven't talked about this book with anybody yet. So this feels special. The catalyst for making it, I don't know. I kind of like I've always been a writer. I think I wrote in an early draft of the book this preposterous statement that like I've always been a writer, but I haven't written a thing. I think it's sort of like a sort of a trajectory of my life. In my head, I'm always telling stories and playing kind of with words, I guess. And it's like I said, it's a little bit preposterous, that notion, but I kind of had never written it down. I always thought of myself as a writer, since I was little. When I was a kid, I had like a special name for myself that wasn't my name. What's that called? A pseudonym.
A pseudonym, yeah.
And I don't know, since an early age, I thought like that's what I was going to be. I was going to be a writer. So, um, cut to like I'm 60 years old and like kind of like not winding down, like I'm still doing a lot of music stuff, but at some point, like I have a really good friend in San Francisco. Her name is JD, who I'm in a band with, JD Sampson, and she said to me, we talk about like the artistic process a lot for whatever reason. She's a teacher. And she said, "Are you doing your morning pages?" She said that to me once. And I was like, wait, what's that? And as I said it, I knew what she meant. Like morning pages can only mean one thing. You get up in the morning, first thing, and you just write, write, write. And that's part of a process of this book called The Artist's Way, which I know is popular amongst artists and sort of a source of inspirational, sort of like encouragement for artists. I've never read it, but I knew when she said that what it meant. And I knew in my head, like, oh, that's what I need to be doing. I have to get up in the morning, first thing, and write, 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 write. I don't know why it came up when it did in that time of my life, but she said that, and the next morning I did that. I did that in the morning, and then I continued to do it. And I did it like, for over a year. I think it was during the COVID. That didn't have as much to do with it as like sort of the drama would kind of hint at, but I just kind of like I kept at it and I started sort of writing this big piece that turned into a memoir and I just kind of like got a really, really long story in a big book of like just things I had been through as through my life. And that was the beginning of it, I think, was that encouragement from JD for whatever reason.
And it's essentially led you to where you are now, where you're discussing such a vast array of stories, anecdotes, and an encapsulation of your life and where you've lived. I mean, everyone who obviously knows the name recognizes you through your time with Faith No More, Imperial Teens, and of course Men on Men. But like to sit back and think about those struggles, those stories, put them down and jot them down. Did you have moments where you're like, oh shit, I can't write this, I can't tell people this?
Yeah, there's a lot of reveal in the book for sure. Like things that like I hadn't talked about even with like, I'm really close with my sisters. I have three sisters, and growing up as a gay kid, like there's a lot of like secrets, my generation anyway, like growing up and being gay and like keeping that from people sort of bred this really secretive person. And I've continued to be that person through my life. Like I know it's really typical of a lot of men, particularly from my generation, kind of dealing with the shame and sort of of coming out and being gay and holding on to that. But I have a lot of stories. Like when I was a kid, I was a really sexually promiscuous kid. And I had always, like as a kid, kept that secret. Like who would share that? Even with my sisters, who I'm super close with, and they know everything about me, and that's a thing that I'd never discussed with them. That was kind of a tough thing. Like writing down, I was just like fully transparent. And I just wrote from a speculatively, like just like me point of view, and I kind of revealed like everything about myself in those kind of terms, secretive things as well. And at the end of the day, I had this piece that was like, yeah, really revealing and super vulnerable. So writing it, I just kind of made that decision. But once I was done and had it on paper, and like then I started talking about like, publishers and stuff, it was like a big step. And it turned into this thing like, okay, I've got to I've got to have a conversation with at least with my sisters, because my family, we're all super tight, and I have to like kind of full reveal and talk about like what I was doing as a kid. That was a really specifically like charged thing for me to come out with. And then there's a lot of like drug sort of references, and it's very vulnerable. The book is a lot of sort of like divulgence, and it's a little bit insane. Like my friends and my sisters that I've shared it with are all kind of like, wow, I can't believe you went there. And it's kind of true, but I don't know. It's kind of like it's a good time in the world for me to like be sharing these things for whatever reason. I think politically, it's like I just kind of feel like, the right and Republicans and MAGA in the world are so pushy and sort of like just preposterous in their sort of like, statements of what they're willing to like stomp out into the world, if that makes sense. And it's sort of like, in my heart, I'm kind of like to those people who have the nerve to like be the way they are. I'm kind of like, fuck you. I'm gonna throw this in your face, and it's gonna be challenging and a kind of a, like a radical notion for a lot of people to sort of read or be exposed to. And it feels good in that way to sort of like balance the spectrum and sort of like stand up for my people and stand up for myself and talk about, what I believe in today's political climate.
And it's good that you're being so open and vocal about all of this because obviously with your upbringing, with you being in the public eye with the bands and everything like that, I mean, you speak about not having that role model or that person to look up to who was also gay in the industry. So there was really no one that you could not sort of idolize is not the right word, but sort of look to and relate to and go, okay, you're like me. So how do you navigate something like that in the 90s in a band where you're in the public eye?
Yeah, it was a difficult sort of like time. Looking back on it and what sort of like that sort of that attitude was about, it's kind of like hard to imagine. Like, that people were that sort of phobic back then about gay people, but the world was really like that, and a lot of the book is about that, about the sort of the judgment of like straight culture on gay men, and sort of like the reaction from gay men, and how do we deal with that? And particularly my generation, yeah, like you said, there weren't a lot of role models for me. And it was a clunky time as a kid to not have that. And what I was talking before about secrets, like there's no other option from my generation, speaking sort of like from where I was coming from. There wasn't any other option but to be secretive and hide things because, yeah, like you were saying, and I've said in my book a lot, there weren't a lot of role models. There was no one I could look up to, especially in the world of music. Like when I started sort of like coming out back in the 90s, there was really no one in my world that had a gay voice. Like the only person that I kind of knew while we got to become really close, and she's one of my best friends, was Patty Schemmel from Hole. Like besides Patty, I really didn't know queer people in rock. There just wasn't that in my world. Like when I was super young, I remember even like Elton John, I was a big fan of, and I remember listening to him on the radio at one point, and he was talking about like getting married and stuff. It was that phase when he was like really hiding his sexuality. And as a kid, as a young kid, I knew he was gay, but like and then seeing him sort of hide that, or having that sort of like that prospect of like, oh, here's an icon that I can sort of like latch onto, taken away from me in that way, and him sort of shutting down and sort of doubling down and saying, no, I'm straight. I'm getting married to a woman, was like, oh my God, it's such a slap in the face for me as a young kid. Like all I wanted was sort of like a direction and the sort of like a person that would say, like, yeah, this is okay, you can be this way. But there just wasn't that. Like even Queen, I talk about in my book too. Like I remember Queen, they wouldn't come out and talk about being gay. I remember there was a reference at one point I remember reading somewhere, and it was like, well, we're guys like, our band is called Queen, and we basically like sing opera music, so you do the math. Like, okay, they were saying they were gay, but they weren't saying it.
Mm.
Everything that was even said in those regards was sort of like guarded and cloaked and sort of said in such a shameful way. It was hard to sort of like get on board with that, even though, okay, I even remember, like the Village People. I remember like them speaking, like as a kid, like, oh, clearly, oh, here's a gay representation. But I remember them saying, well, we don't really want to say if we're gay or we're straight because we don't want to lose any of our audience. And what does that say to a young kid? That
Mm.
means like, okay, say you're gay, people are going to not like you. That's the exact statement it was. So like coming from that world, it was like it was definitely a hard place. And then even as I got older too, like I always say, like Michael Stipe was not gay when I was coming out of the closet. That wasn't a direction I could look. Even Bob Mould, who's like very outwardly gay now, was like that wasn't sort of that wasn't those two voices, which are pretty strong and queer right now, those weren't options for me. So it felt very alone to come out in that sort of like environment, in that, you know, crew of people when there weren't voices like that.
And I guess one of those things that you try and do is you're barking up those trees and trying to find someone that you can relate to, someone like you, so you don't feel so isolated and segregated. And there's that stigmatization that comes with gay men. And when 1987 hit, obviously with the AIDS epidemic and the Grim Reaper, like it made you want to stay in and not tell these people that this is who you are, for that shame that you might endure being associated with gay men.
For sure. A lot of levels in which sort of it was difficult. And that was for sure a whole tableau of like humiliation and shame was like HIV and AIDS. It's like, yeah, it was just like at that point it reinforced the notion that gay is bad. Not only is gay bad, it's toxic. It's not only toxic, it's poisonous, it's deadly. And if you're gay, you're sort of like, yeah, you're gonna die. So yeah, it was a lot as a young kid to sort of deal with. But at the same time, that said, I don't mean to be sort of like, boo-hoo about it. It was like it created a really specific kind of person that I am. And I'm kind of thankful for that. It was hard to go through that sort of generational sort of like weirdness, but at the same time, it really was like it's a strength that I have that a lot of like gay people who weren't in my generation don't necessarily like tap into.
I mean, it's a term of endearment as well. Like you can share these stories with people who, like my generation who are coming through now. I came out, what, all of 8 years ago, and I'm just starting to get to that point now where I'm finally comfortable with myself, my sexuality, who I am, what I like, and who I'm willing to talk to about. But what I've found is talking about people who have gone through those struggles or gone through, the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it might be, like those stories of what they endured kind of makes it easier for my generation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel pretty aware of that. I said, like I mean there were certain things like Quentin Crisp was a voice that I knew I could sort of like count on. Like Naked Civil Servant was an important book for me, like reading about someone's struggles. That was kind of like in England, but it made sense to me. And I know as a young kid, like reading like voices like that, even Oscar Wilde was like, oh, it made sense. So yeah, I'm aware of that. And it's cool. Like when I did come out like as a kid when I was in Fake No More and we were in the middle of sort of our sort of like crazy like this big macho arena tour, and I chose that time to sort of come out of the closet and talk about my sexuality. I knew and I was aware at the time that like my voice like was sort of a beacon for kids, and that's really an awesome thing. It's so cool to have those stories and to be able to share that about myself in a way that could potentially like help younger people. That's really an awesome thing.
And going through it yourself and having to deal with that with no one to talk to, no one to turn to, no one to look up to. Like, was your sexuality an issue within the band, and was that what kept you from coming out sooner?
I think it was just an inherent thing. Like if you had asked me or asked any of the members of the band, like, is it a deal at all that Roddy is gay? Like it was so not a deal. We lived in San Francisco. All of the people in the band were so open-minded. They were all encouraging. But in my head, it was something different, and I just wasn't willing to go there. And that's on me. I talk that about that a lot in the book. Like Billy and I were sort of best friends. So this is the time we were very young, really young kids. Billy's the bass player of Faith No More. And yeah, the fact that I wasn't able to be sort of open with him about my sexuality is kind of it still is something that's kind of a weird rub for me. It's not cool. Like I wish I would have had the wherewithal to sort of like be open with like I mean he was one of my best friends so amongst the band it wasn't on them, it was on me. I just wasn't willing to sort of
Mm.
like go there with them based on sort of like the childhood that I had and the culture that we lived in. It was really difficult, but I think I definitely like I mean they were have only been supportive and sort of like understanding in that plight of mine.
And it's like, yeah, you kind of reflect on where you've come from and knowing that they all had your back then, but internally, it's a struggle that gay men have. You know, we live day in, day out, wondering what people think of us, when at the end of the day, it's just what's stuck in the head, it's what the brain
Yeah,
thinks.
yeah, it's a lot of the head.
So a lot of the times, obviously growing up, with the starting off the band in the early 90s, early 80s, sorry, starting out in San Francisco and sort of having that transitional period from what we've read in pop culture and what we've read in books and memoirs from that time. You obviously touched on this if in your memoir with the, your drug side and your battle with heroin addiction. This seemed to be something that was prevalent through the 90s. What can you recall about like why that was a prevalent drug for musicians?
Yeah, I don't know why. I think heroin, particularly, I'm just saying that word is really so charged with like horror and sort of like a darkness. And it's horrible, but it's like sort of this cool factor, honestly. Like I remember like back in the day when we started doing heroin, even to say that word is like, whoa. I mean, that's intense. That's a deep place to go to. That's really super dark. And it sort of did like, I mean, it's a sort of what I think like people in recovery would call some sort of junkie pride, but it did feel like this like really charged statement to do that particular drug. It's like it took a lot to like to go there. To like, inject a drug into your arm is crazy. Like, can you
Mm.
imagine as kids doing that? It's so wild. But at the same time, it was bold and brave and like fucked up and like, over the top. And that was kind of part of it. And it was, I don't know why it happened in history the way that it did, but just like in that time in history, like, I don't know. I don't know why we were doing that. I don't know why it came up the way that it did, but it was definitely a dark place, and the struggle of it is was real, and that's a big part of the book too.
Well, how is your health today from those years and where you've overcome and where you are now? How are you looking after yourself nowadays?
I mean, look at me, Paul.
Stop it.
I look amazing, am I right?
Yeah, you go all right. You know, for
Yeah, I'm
you're
fine.
pushing 60, that's all right.
Pushing 60, I'm 62, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm an
well,
old man.
you don't look a day
I
over
feel
58,
really
so
good.
own
I
it.
don't really like, I don't know. I'm in pretty good health. I don't shoot heroin anymore. I don't really do drugs. I swim every day. I don't know. I feel super healthy.
Good. And you're still active with the bands and everything like that. Man on Man is obviously your latest project, which you formed in COVID alongside your partner Joey. It's just been uh, an awakening, a gay awakening for many men around the world.
That's cool of you to say. Thanks. Yeah, it's a special project. I don't know that many sort of like partners who've done sort of what we did. We started that band in the pandemic, and we've had such success with it, just personally and sort of achievement of like a relationship. It really sort of like fast tracked our relationship to make a couple records and tour the way that we have. writing songs and sort of singing about our lifestyle and our sort of love for each other is crazy. No one does that. That's pretty intact. Joey, though, we're in Provincetown right now. He has a store and he's running his store for the summer. I have my book coming out, so we haven't been doing man on man stuff, but we are doing like Imperial Teen was just in town. Will and Joan from Imperial Team were just here. They just left last week, and we're finishing up songs that we made recorded like for a new record. That's one project that I'm doing. Also, my band Crickets that I mentioned earlier with my friend JD Sampson and Michael. We started doing songs again. We created a record and we released it. It came out like really like honestly on the eve of COVID. COVID, it was the super clunky time. But that's when the record came out. That's when we finished it. And it just kind of like came and went. Nobody knows that record. And we just started playing shows again, which is super fun. And they're coming up here at the end of this week, and we're going to record some more songs and do a show in Provincetown. So those two musical things, I'm kind of like they're on my plate right now, but it's mostly kind of about the book. And I think I'll get back. Joey and I will start sort of writing songs, I think, in the wintertime and make another record.
Where you are at with the world, with your relationship, and with the way that life is right now, how do you take that influence and put that into the music that you're creating? Because I would assume that the projects that you've done over the years have been synonymous with your life story, your coming out, your sexuality, your life journey. Where do you find yourself now going into potentially writing new material?
That's a funny question, Paul. I don't know. It's just sort of like I think a lot of the things that I sort of am involved in like aren't so Roddy specific, maybe. Like the Man on Man project was really so much about us and my life and sort of love and about starting a relationship. I don't know. The Crickets music, we sort of have like this, I don't know, I guess it just kind of varies from project to project. Like Imperial Teen is super family oriented. We're really close and we've been doing what we've been doing for like over 25 years. And we're sort of like what we do is we come from a family dynamic and write about ourselves and sort of getting along and making things work amongst the four of us. It's kind of the same with crickets. Crickets has this crazy theme of sort of like our concept is sort of like starting creating something and stripping it down. Um, I guess it's specific sort of project to project, the sources of inspiration.
And where you're at in life, obviously.
Yeah, and sort of my contribution to it, like probably is different from project to project also.
It was interesting doing the deep dive and going back through, the back catalogs to try and get an idea and understanding of your journey to where you are now. And it honestly felt like Imperial Team was the project you had when you first came out. Man on Man was synonymous with the sound and the sonic landscape and all that. So like it's interesting that so much time has passed between those releases, but the heart and soul of what you do musically is still ingrained throughout.
Yeah, I don't really recognize that, but yeah, I can kind of see it when you bring it up. I mean, it's sort of like, yeah, I mean, I can only sort of like, I'm not that I only have one note, but definitely like I have a sort of like perspective that doesn't like, it can only change so much. And I think sort of, yeah, from band to band, it's sort of like, there's definitely a through line and a sort of like a source from which I can kind of like pull and it kind of comes from who I am. And like, yeah, I think like it's hard to sort of make that dotted line sometimes from like Faith No More to where I am now. Faith No More was such a like a blatantly, brazenly like kind of like macho kind of like vibe. It's hard to like see myself sometimes in that mix, but then sometimes I write about it in the book too. Like also, I kind of like, oh, I can see it really clearly sometimes when I look back at the Faith No More sound, like who I was and what I was struggling to be and how I was struggling to be heard. It was like it was this like really intense sound. It was like really like a pummel of like drums and bass, which is what we were, Billy and Mike, the three of us like kind of like started and did what we did. It was all of our music, I think, basically came from the three of us, but it was like then it was like Roddy added this sort of like prettiness on top of sort of like what we did as a band. And I guess in that context too, that was sort of a voice of mine also.
Yeah. Do you miss the camaraderie? Do you miss, where you come from and the legacy that's obviously left with Faith?
No, I mean I'm still friends with everybody and we're pretty close. There's a specific way of touring that we did and the specific sort of like agenda that we had when we toured. I do sort of miss that. There's something to being like that 90s kind of musician in a band that was really specific to the time, in which we would just like break our necks. We worked so hard. We would tour 30 days in a row, you know. It was a really intense sort of conveyor belt of like productivity that we would do when we were kids. And that was a specific mindset to get into. And I liked it. It was really fun and it felt good to be sort of like working in that way. And it was so high charged, to like do a tour like that. Like we would tour, like Faith No More would tour for like close to a year, even longer. And coming off of that was like always the thing that we would stop and it would be like, oh my God. And you would kind of go crazy because like you're so used to that stimulation. And like to stop was just like, oh my God, your sort of gut falls out. And that was kind of about like that specific way of touring. There was so much stimulation. And yeah, I miss that sometimes. That was a really particular specific sort of way of creating art that I don't do so much anymore.
And I guess you sort of get to, I don't want to call you old, that's not the right word, but you get to an elder age, a mature age, and you just can't do what you were doing 20, 30 years ago.
A little bit. I don't know. I think if everything was on the plate and we were doing like full on tours, I kind of feel like it's a sort of like prideful thing, but I think I'm sort of capable of that. Maybe I'm not though. I don't know if I could really do that, but it feels like I could. I would like to say yes, I could. If a tour were in front of me and like say Man on Man or Crickets or Imperial Teen was offered, an income in which at least our expenses were covered and we could sort of like come away from it like not losing money. I think I could get on board in that way.
So essentially, if I put together all the money in my wallet or
Yeah.
$120 or whatever's in there, we could get men on man to Australia.
Yeah. I mean, we almost came to Australia a little while ago. It was
I did see
we were
that, yeah.
coming, yeah, to play some festivals. It didn't work out, but yeah, we would come to Australia for sure.
Well, the possibilities are endless, and who knows? After this book, we could even tag along and chuck in a book tour, a Q&A session type
Yeah.
thing.
That's a really specific sort of like type of touring too. Like, I mean, there's the big band touring and, night after night of shows. But honestly, like as a writer, I was talking to Margaret Cho last night. Do you know who Margaret Cho is?
I've heard the name, and you can judge me all you like.
No, no judgment. She's an awesome comedian that I've known for a long time. And she's sort of like, she was in Provincetown and did a show the other day. And as a comedian, it's wild. She just shows up. She doesn't even need material. I mean, she needs material. She doesn't have anything like she did. There's certainly no gear to carry or move from city to city. And the logistics of pulling that off and doing a tour as a comedian compared to a tour as a rock band is like, wow, you got it made. But I was talking to her last night. I was like, oh, you know what? Like, yeah, I was kind of realizing it as I was saying it, but I was like, I'm going to be doing that really soon. Like, my book's going to come out and I'm going to go on a book tour. And it's like, can you imagine how dreamy? All I need to bring is the book. And probably, honestly, not even that. I bet I could just show up at the event, at the store or whatever, and I bet they would have 1 million books. I could just pick up one of those and read from that. So easy.
I guess that sort of circles back to what you were saying at the start and being comfortable with sharing these stories with people, being able and being vulnerable to stand in front of a crowd and say, this is what happened to me. These are my stories. These are my struggles.
Yeah, it does feel really good. I've only done one event so far. My friend Ann does an event in New York City at the Parkside Lounge. She's really awesome, and we did an event, and I read from the book. Yeah, and it felt great in that way. I was aware of what I was doing, but I remember I got up on the stage and one of the first lines I read from the book was like, it was like, all I wanted was to be molested by a priest. And just to
I
say that, I know it evokes laughter, but it was like it's really intense. And I was aware of that when I said it, and I was aware of like what I'm choosing to stand up and say in front of people. And yeah, it was a wallop of like, whoa.
it's capturing the attention straight away and bringing those people into that moment.
And it takes, I mean, it's a pretty specific niche of crowd, like it's a hard thing to put out into the world, like a book, as I've learned. Like I've written a book and like then, okay, I want to share it with people and sort of get my word out there. It's a lot to ask. Like, hey, I wrote this book. It's 250 pages. You're like, I mean, people say yes and people read it, but it's honestly like there's not as many people in the world that read as there are who listen to music. So it's a big ask, a book.
So there'll be no chance of you narrating the audio book for anything like that.
No, I am narrating the
Oh, you
audiobook.
are? Oh, good. Awesome. I didn't,
Yeah,
yeah, didn't know that was happening. So there you go.
that was interesting to me. You know how long it takes to record? How long would you think? 250
Oh,
pages?
I would assume something like a month or two.
4 days. We'll do it in 4 days.
Oh,
10
fuck. There you go.
a.m.
All
till
right.
4 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, September 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th. From 10 to 4. We have an hour off for lunch, but that's how long it will take to read that many pages.
You learn something new every day.
There's also a fee that I get paid for it. Like, I mean, this is interesting, probably unconventional and unorthodox for me to talk about, but it was most interesting to me. Like, I don't get money as a creator of the project. I mean, maybe down the line somehow, maybe if that's like people are charged, like maybe if they read it somewhere, maybe they paid for it through a paywall somehow. I tend to think not. Like I don't I certainly wasn't jumping into this sort of like part of my life as a writer to make money. That's not what it's about. But like as a reader, just as like a, you know, going in, like if I would have chosen someone else to read my book for me, this wouldn't have been they would have been paid and I wouldn't have made this money. But as a reader, I get paid $4,000 to read
Yeah,
those
right.
pages for four
Right.
days.
Well, let's wrap it all up, encompassing everything. The Royal We comes out in November on the 4th. You can get your pre-sales right now. Just head along to Roddy's Instagram. Give him a perv while you're there as well. Roddy, final question. Flashing back, do you remember when your gay awakening was, and what was the moment for you?
I don't really know. I think like as a gay kid, you're sort of born with that. I don't remember if there was a moment or anything. I sort of remember more than anything kind of the shame of it or kind of knowing a little bit that it was like wrong and different. I can't think of any sort of like particular time in which that was a thing for me. I remember there were boys in the neighborhood that I hooked up with, and I was super young. I was probably 7 or 8. So I don't know. From the time you're born, I think that's just sort of like, born this way, as someone said.
And then you fall into the gay life and then the way it leads you, and then next minute you're 62 years old, successful musician releasing a memoir.
Yeah, it just happened.
Roddy, it's been a pleasure.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for talking to me.